see it changing and I don't know why, I just don't know why. I see it changing and I don't know why, I just don't know why.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Songs Nobody Asked Me For. Now, this is an odd one because I redid this one. I've only redone two. I redid, I think it was maybe the first or second episode I did. I think maybe the second episode because it just didn't seem quite right. And I'll explain in a minute when you watch the actual one why I redid this one. However, when I watched the next one, okay, it all gets very confusing. This is the trouble when you start redoing things. In this one, the old one, I had actually introduced my new guitar that I'd bought and shown you this guitar. So I talk about that guitar. So I thought just before the episode starts, I probably ought to show you my new, not so new for me now, but new guitar. I was very excited about it at the time. I still am because I've managed to get a great sound out of it. Anyway, I'm going to swizzle my camera around now and I'm going to show you my lovely, I hope, this is the case and the grand reveal of my wonderful green Gretsch guitar. I'm going to take it out and put it on the wall because it's a lot easier to see really, but here we go. Oh, nearly dropped the bloody thing there, but there we go, we're okay. So this is my Gretsch guitar. I am so in love with it. It sounds wonderful, and yeah, I sort of thought I probably ought to do that at the beginning of this really, just to sort of say, look, here it is. Here we are. Oh, we love each other. And yeah, I'll let you get on with the episode. But then when the next episode comes out, it will make sense when I say, oh yeah, I showed you my Gretsch guitar last time. Okay. Right, better get on with it. Hi, my name's Nigel. I am the singer and songwriter of the Plymouth UK based indie funk band The Curve. And this is my podcast, Songs Nobody Asked Me For. I have to confess this is a remake, actually. I kind of, from time to time, I've come across these podcasts and I look at them a lot because I need to edit them. And sometimes I see one and I think to myself, yeah, I'm not really sure that really says what I wanted to say or says anything really. And with this one, where I'm really just trying to think back earlier to how comes I got into songwriting as a thing, I didn't really feel I'd said much. And there were other things that came to mind afterwards and I kind of thought, in the end, I'm not going to do this very often, but I kind of thought, well, maybe I'll just do it again, maybe it'll be interesting. Because it's not always, sometimes I think I'm going to lose the thread of what I've talked about, but I think this time maybe it's okay. So I was kind of aware of I've talked a little bit about sort of earlier iterations of playing music and some of when I first got into music, but I wondered still where that comes from, that idea of being a songwriter and being creative in that way, and whether, I guess you've got that sort of nurture and nature, I was watching a little Instagram post earlier today when I can't remember who it was. It's quite a well-known guy. If I remember, I will put the link in the chat here. It was one of these TED Talks, but he was saying that he'd met Paul McCartney sometime, and he'd asked Paul McCartney if his music teacher's department at school had ever said that he was good at music, and he said no. And then they basically, the same school George Harrison had been to, and Paul McCartney said no, they didn't recognise anything musical in him either, and they were told they wouldn't achieve anything, and that school missed half of the Beatles, and I think what he concluded was that there must be many people whose talents and skills are missed, and if they're not nurtured right, they don't develop into anything. Or if things don't happen in the right way. I talked really early on about that idea of luck being important or opportunity. So I guess, there's always that nature bit. But I was thinking more, I suppose, when I was thinking of this podcast about nurturing really and what happened in my younger life that might have influenced some of this. And I came up with a few things really. One is first of all that my parents, for whatever reason, it was really important to them that we learnt a musical instrument. Neither of them really played a musical instrument. They both liked this sort of, I've talked before about them liking this sort of amateur dramatics sort of stuff, and we'll talk about that again in a few moments, but they liked all of this Gilbert and Sullivan stuff and singing little songs, and my mum had been in a few of these things, but never in a starring role. She'd always have a supporting role. My dad, not sure he was so into that. but they both, it was really important for them that we learn a musical instrument. So my older brother learned to play the clarinet, and I've talked about him. I might not have talked about him, you see, because I'm redoing this. I think maybe it's to come actually. Talked about him playing in the band. He joined my band for a while when we were in London as a saxophonist. He's a great saxophone player. So he learned to play the clarinet, the saxophone, and I learned to play the guitar. And I think I was lucky, that they supported that, because it was at school that we had this. And I always remember that, the teacher was going to do guitar lessons, and it was classical guitar lessons. And my mum and dad decided they would buy me a guitar, which was because we had to get a guitar for this. So they took me to this music shop in Romford, and I'm left-handed. And the music shop tried to sell them initially a left-handed guitar, which was really expensive. And for some reason, thankfully, it must have been the shop assistant said, but look, you don't need a left-handed guitar, you could just have a right-handed guitar. So I was basically told, you're going to learn this right-handed, which didn't make any difference to me then because I was really young. So I did those classical guitar lessons, and my parents were very supportive of it. In fact, my mum used to make me practice every day. She had half an hour's practice every day. And she did this throughout my childhood and into my early teens, really. And she would always say to me, you don't have to practice, but then you have to give it up. So if you want to do it, you have to practice half an hour every day. But if you don't want to do it, that's fine. You can stop anytime you want. And I did this with one of my sons who ended up playing sport. And I said to him, if you want to do it, you need to practice, because he did a particular role that could be quite dangerous if you didn't do it properly. And so I would say you can stop it any time you want, but if you're going to do it, you're also, as well as the team you're in, you're going to have this individual one-to-one training. And he grumbled sometimes, but again, he also stuck with it because he was given a choice, But I really begrudged it, and I hated practicing. But somehow I stuck with it. So I had that teacher, and then I had another young woman give me classical lessons for a while. Then suddenly stopped for some reason. And the last person I had come over with a classical guitar was a guy who was, again, middle-aged guy, amazing classical guitar player. Always came in a three-piece suit, but clearly had an alcohol problem, which, I come from a family of Methodists, and my parents didn't drink. I didn't really know anything about alcohol at that time. But this guy would sometimes turn up smelling of what I realise now was alcohol. And this affected him in two ways. Either he was very stern with me, which scared the shit out of me because I was a young, quite sort of sensitive lad. But I always remember he used to threaten to sellotape my thumb to the right place in the back of the neck if I didn't get it right. And he kept stopping and starting me and getting cross and saying really quite rigorous. But the other thing he'd do when he was drunk, and sometimes he'd be very benign. Sometimes people become very lovely when they're drunk, aren't they? And he would just play me classical music, and he was stunningly good. And I always, what I always remember is him playing this song with it was like rain. There was raindrops coming, and he was using the sort of harmonics when you just touch the string so that it makes a note, and did it really quietly and slowly and built this up, and I was just used to watch in awe. Always loved it when he was like that, because he didn't teach me anything. He just played the guitar and smiled and wobbled his head a bit. I remember him being quite wobbly while he was doing it, really. I think in the end, at some point, I must have told my mum that he smelled a bit strange, and she must have smelled the alcohol at some point, and that stopped. And that was the classical training I had. But I think it was significant. I've talked about this before, but I think that the rigour that brought in and the environment that I was surrounded in really affected, I think, how I wrote melodies and the music that I got into. I have a couple of other things that sit within there. One is that my parents were just avid Radio 2 listeners. It was on all the time, and Radio 2 now is kind of quite a trendy place in many ways. It's a place where you can hear lots more diverse music than you can on a lot of other stations, and I think there's a lot of music that's played on Radio 2 you just wouldn't hear anywhere else. And that's fantastic. And they have their blues evenings and their jazz evenings and all of this different thing. But back then, my memory was of sort of Terry Wogan having programs, Jimmy Young, and people who would play very middle of the road music. So I would grow up listening to the likes of Gilbert O'Sullivan and Matt Monro and crooners, Frank Sinatra. Very sort of easygoing music, but very melodious. And I also remember lots of sort of comedy songs. My dad used to like these comedy songs, um, which would sort of, I don't know, I can't even think of one now really. There was a song called Captain Beaky, I think, which was just a song about animals. And I don't know, my dad seemed to love things like that. But those sorts of things were always on. And so very diverse, very weird groupings of music that I would listen to. But this stuff was all around me and it was on all the time. So there was always music on. And my elder brother would be learning his clarinet. And I got very into buying records and cassettes from a fairly early age, buying some pretty naff things. But in fact, I remember getting one of these sort of mono cassette players. And my elder brother, bless him, because he did some good things like this, he bought me two albums, and my mum bought me one. So my mum bought me a John Denver album. I still have it, actually. I'll pause for a second. I still have all three of these albums, which I find quite amazing, really. I'm going to pause and show you. In fact, I tell a lie, I have two of them, but I know what the third one was. So my mum bought me this. I've still got it. John Denver, Rhyme and Reason, and it's got... I know all the songs, I love them, because I just it was my first cassette, and I had a mono cassette player, and I played it incessantly. And it's got Leaving on a Jet Plane on it, which is the one most people would know, but I got a very sentimental feeling about that tape, And then for Christmas, my older brother bought me two cassettes, and he bought me Crime of the Century by Supertramp. It's a great album. It's still one of my favourite albums. And he bought me this Genesis album. I've talked about Genesis probably, and I probably will talk again. I'm curious to know whether that's going to be back to front, that right, because as I look at this, I'm recording it's back to front. We will find out. Nursery Crime. And really got into these two albums, and on cassette, And then I got my first LP player, record player. So it's kind of like a sort of, it's like a trendy little one that we used to have, that sort of, your portable, it would say, but it was probably weighed about 10 ton, but was pretty modern back then. And the first album I would say I got that I thought was pretty cool, really, and I still do, really, was Hunky Dory by Bowie. And I discovered Bowie, and then that kind of really took me into some really new places. And then I had Pav influencing me, and Pav, I've got to get my timing right. I'm going to be meeting Pav at some point later. I talked in some of these podcasts about hoping to meet Pav. Well, I have met Pav. We had a great chat, though the sound quality is not great. I've had to work on that. But Pav was really into a very different type of music to me. And Pav brought me this sort of very indie influence. And he loved bands and music that nobody knew about, And I think I talk in one of these other episodes about how he introduced me to XTC, for example. But he particularly, someone I'm always thankfully introduced me to, was Elvis Costello. And there's an album of his I bought really early on called Imperial Bedroom, which is kind of one of my favourite albums as well. I love the lyrics of Elvis Costello, really have always sat with me. So although I've always struggled with lyrics, he was an inspiration to me. And Bowie's just, was such a big figure in my life. And they sit alongside of Genesis and Supertramp and bands that were kind of sat more with my upbringing and where this music is. And it's interesting because I reached this phase and point here, which I did when I did this before, when I was thinking, am I getting anywhere with this? And I don't know, other than that music was around me. So possibly, whilst I wasn't, I didn't have this amazing mentor that brought me on in songwriting and encouraged me in that way, I did have parents that saw playing an instrument as being really useful and important, an important part of life, even though they didn't play. A mum who pushed me to practice and to keep going if I wanted to do it. I'd do it properly. That's what she felt. I had rigorous lessons in guitar early on, which didn't invite me to be able to reproduce rock songs or play leads or anything like that at that stage. But I had a discipline, that I really had to work hard on before I moved into sort of more folky stuff. And then eventually the last lessons I had was with a teacher at school, and I will tell that another time because that moved me into a strange place in which I eventually just gave all that up and just went my own way. But I've got that rigour, I've got that support. I don't have a overt support, but I have an environment that might allow me to think I could experiment and to think that I knew enough about the music that I was creating and the music that was around me to think about writing. And I've often said that my music that I create is quite melodious, and I often think about the structure of the music, whereas words I struggle more with. And I think it's because of that Radio 2 prog rocky, folky sort of background, really, Because I also later got really into. I found another tape here. I don't have many tapes left, but that's a sort of John Martin. I love John Martin. Solid Air is one of my favourite albums as well. I discovered Joni Mitchell when I was a little bit older, Neil Young, and all of these just inspired me into thinking about writing songs for some reason. I have another influence in my childhood. That is that I was in this strange entertainment group. And this is, I think, I'm probably thinking when I'm about 8, 9, 10 maybe. My parents were friends with 2 other sets of parents. This is through the church they used to go to. So there were my parents and there were 2 other sets. That's what I'm going to say. We were 3 boys. One of the other sets of parents had 3 girls, and the other sets of parents had a boy and a girl. And the parents had all known each other when they were younger and had been involved in these singing productions. And one of the dads used to do the productions. He had been the person who had been very influential in getting these amateur dramatic things off the ground. And I think it was his idea to start this little entertainment group with the kids. So we would all sing and do various routines, and we would go around old people's homes, disability centres, places, and perform for the older people at these places. We did it for a long time, and I think we were fairly successful. We certainly did over 100 concerts, and possibly more actually. We used to get paid occasionally, so I guess my parents must have been given some money for that, and that was amazing, as you could suddenly get a little payout. It probably wasn't a lot, but for me then, if I was given 20 quid or something, it would be 2 or 3 pretty decent Airfix models I'd be going off and buying. So I remember one time going and buying Airfix models with this money. We ended up in a local newspaper, and I've got this, and I'm going to put this on in a second now, and just to show you. But I've recently been coming across some tapes of old band stuff, and I found amongst it a tape of one of these concerts. It's amazing. It's the only one that's around, and I've managed to get hold of a cassette player that will move things onto MP3. So I'm going to play this little bit of me being introduced in the background, and then just me saying what I'm going to play, and the beginnings of me playing a little bit of classical music, because we did these kind of ensemble routines. We'd always have an introduction. They'd all be old musical songs, If I remember that we used to introduce a song called "Let Us Entertain You," "Let Us Entertain You," "Let Us be," all this sort of stuff. Proper musical stuff. And then we would do these medleys at the end. We would do a London medley, which was like old wartime London songs. Maybe it's because I'm a Londoner, and my old man said follow the van, rather. Some we do all together, some we do in twos and solos and stuff. But each of us would have a slot in this, and mine was generally that I would play my guitar. I think I play my guitar and sing a bit in this one, but also at the beginning I play this classical song. So I'm going to put that on with the soundtrack and show you these pictures now.
Right, Nigel is going to come back now, and he's going to play us a song on his guitar, and he's going to sing a bit, and then later on his big brother's going to come in and they're going to sing a bit.
Well, to start with, I'm going to say Buckingham Town.
Wow, I've only recently come across this tape again, and haven't heard it in decades. And to hear myself as a sort of young, sort of maybe 9, 8-year-old, I need to look at the year on the cassette box. But it's just weird. And I've got a slight Essex accent, which I never really felt I did, really, but it's interesting. But I can't help but think that's an unusual experience for somebody to have, to be in that sort of thing when they're a child, really. So the idea of music being all around me was always there, I suppose. And that's got to have had an influence. But it never moved me into a place of wanting to play other people's songs. It always moved me into a place, it seemed, of writing. So I think there's got to be a bit of that nature stuff within it. And some of this then is a nurturing environment. I should be thankful for that. I'm often a little critical of the know your place type of background and experience I had, and maybe that's added to it as well. But it was a household in which music was embraced, and the playing of music and the writing of music was embraced. My elder brother would just play a lot of jazz with his saxophone and was in jazz bands, but never originals. But he did come and play with us, and yeah, he was great. And some of the tracks that we had of him playing with them, and they're fantastic, really. Wow. I kind of feel I've been quite fast today as well. I'm a little bit hyper. I think it's been a busy day, but I enjoyed that. And actually, that was a little bit of a better conversation than I'd had before. So maybe it was the right thing to do, So, yeah, I'm going to leave it there. Let you get back into the routine of these happening when they should be. And I'm episode 20 down the line, so a completely different person. Anyway, this is the podcast Songs Nobody Asked Me For. Please, do like it, follow us here, go look at the band, hashtag Music the Curve. You can find us all over the place, or on Spotify. Details are at the end, and I'll see you again soon.
We've been together now for such a long time. Can't imagine when I've been so clear. But a second look from the people who know us seems to fill you with a kind of